violence has erupted again in Lebanon and Grenada. In Lebanon, we have some 1,600 Marines, part of a multinational force that's trying to help the people of Lebanon restore order and stability to that troubled land. This past Sunday, at 22 minutes after 6 Beirut time, with dawn just breaking, a truck, looking like a lot of other vehicles in the city, approached the airport on a busy main road. But this one was different. At the wheel was a young man on a suicide mission. The truck carried some 2,000 pounds of explosives, but there was no way our Marine Guards could know this. Their first warning that something was wrong came when the truck crashed through a series of barriers, including a chain link fence and barbed wire entanglements. The guards opened fire, but it was too late. The truck smashed through the doors of the headquarters building in which our Marines were sleeping and instantly exploded. The 4-story concrete building collapsed in a pile of rubble. Who committed this latest atrocity against them and why? Well, we'll do everything we can to ensure that our men are as safe as possible.
This hallowed ground is a memorial resulting from a horrifying attack on the Marine barracks in Beirut, Lebanon on October 23, 1983. The 24th Marine Amphibious Unit from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, was deployed on Operation Peace for Galilee to serve as a peacekeeping force in support of the new Lebanese government during the ongoing Lebanese Civil War. The United States' presence was opposed by Syria and its ally, Iran. The Marines were therefore perceived as enemies.
But I remember when I knew I was going to Beirut that I was like running around. I was Mr. Big Shot, you know, because I'm going to Beirut, buddy. What are you guys gonna do? I'm going where it's at, you know. So I was kind of pumped up about it, really.
There's always talk of a sixth sense. The day before the bombing, we were out just kind of, we had built a makeshift basketball court out front of the BLT building. And the guys were out just playing basketball, and I was talking to Corporal Santos. He and I, we just had this intuition that something felt wrong. And I remember saying to him, I was like, yo, Santos, something's wrong. And he's from Boston, up that way. He's like, yo, Jakes, something's f***ed up, man. And we just felt it. It was in the air. And later that evening, we were in Condition 1, which is the highest alert status. I was on the 4th deck of the building. And as I was walking through on my way back down to my room, I stopped to talk to a friend of mine. His name was, he's from Charlie Company, and his name was Horace Stevens. What's strange about that is Horace Stevens and I, we were in 7th grade together. And stopped, we chatted for a minute, and he gave me a cassette tape. And in my mind, I knew I would never hear that tape. He was the last person I saw, and I went down to my room, went in, took my boots off, put my .45 under my pillow, and laid down.
And I remember Sunday morning, October 23rd, I remember waking up at 6 a.m. in the morning. I knew I had a window of time. If I wanted to get morning chow, I had to get up out of my rack and go. So I got up. I'm looking around in the tent. It's hot. This is proof of divine intervention, because I decided to lay back down and go to sleep rather than go down to the building. And I've said this before, I don't think there's words in the English language to describe the magnitude of the blast. But I do remember suddenly just this humongous blast.
When I woke up again, I guess the sound of the truck ramming the guard shack and entering the building is what woke me up. And I remember jumping up and I ran to the door and I heard small arms fire in the building. And I remember thinking, I was like, these motherfuckers are in the building, motherfucker. And I turned around to my right trying to gauge who was in the room. And I got to Nicholas Baker, and I couldn't tell if he was in there or not. And the last thing I said, it's showtime, ladies. And as I was reaching for my weapon, that's all I remember.
I remember when I woke up, I felt the concussion, the blast, and a wave of heat just kind of whoom, right across my face.
I guess it was several hours later, I learned from Al Sandrick that I guess I had been buried in debris for about several hours. And when I was coming to, of course, everything was a fog. My ears were muffled and ringing, and I could barely see via the dirt and debris in my eyes, blood and everything. And I remember these two white Marines, and they were digging rubble off me, and I could tell that they were visibly upset about something. And trying to piece it together, I'm like, shit, I'm outside. Well, what in the hell is going on here? And I looked down, and I could see dirt and debris and rocks and rubble on me, and I'm trying to help these guys get this stuff off of me. I didn't feel any pain until they picked me up. Both of my legs were broken. I had multiple lacerations, abrasions, burns throughout my entire body. And that's when I started screaming when they picked me up, because I didn't feel pain until then.
Jeeps were turned over, stuff was burning. M16s looked like pretzels. There was papers everywhere. There was dirt everywhere. You know, there were bodies, parts of bodies, you know, just, it was overload. I remember inside there was one area where two slabs had collapsed on top of each other. There was a guy who was trapped, pinned in there, and myself and another Marine were trying to get him out. He was in great distress, you know, and I remember we took turns holding his hand, and we were swinging a sledgehammer at the concrete underneath of him, trying to get him out. I remember there was a chaplain that came and gave him his last rites. And, you know, I mean, there was nothing we could do. It was just, I remember him because he was a staff sergeant. I was a freaking PFC. You know, I mean, young boot Marine and a staff sergeant. I mean, that guy's like, wow. You know, I'm just, and he didn't live.
At 0622 Sunday morning on October 23, 1983, a non-Lebanese terrorist-driven stake-bed truck loaded with explosives equivalent to 21,000 pounds of TNT turned onto an access road leading to the compound. The truck was not the water truck the Marines had been expecting. The driver circled the parking lot 2 times before accelerating and crashing through the barbed wire fence around the parking lot. The truck passed the sentry posts, and since the sentries were operating under rules of engagement, made it very difficult to respond rapidly, as they were ordered to keep their weapons at condition 4. No magazine inserted, no rounds in the chamber. By the time the 2 sentries were able to engage, the truck was already heading towards the building's entryway. The bomb was carried on a layer of concrete covered with a slab of marble to direct the blast upward. The suicide bomber, an Iranian national, reached the entryway and detonated his explosives. The force of the explosion collapsed the 4-story building into rubble, crushing many inside. In the days following, rescue efforts continued, at times taking sniper fire, but rescuers still pulled survivors from the rubble and were airlifted to the USS Iwo Jima, located offshore. Although it was an act motivated by the presence of the multinational force, U.S. President Ronald Reagan called the attack a despicable act. The attack represented the deadliest single-day death toll for the Marine Corps since Iwo Jima, and was the deadliest single-day death toll for the United States military since the first day of the Vietnam War's Tet Offensive. On February 8, 1984, the USS New Jersey fired almost 300 shells at Druze and Syrian positions east of Beirut.
It's been nearly 30 years, and for 30 years, I have remembered this event, I've thought about it at least once a day, sometimes more, for 30 years straight, every day. It just keeps giving. I applaud the efforts of the recovery teams, and if I had to do it again, I would go back with BLT 18 24th Mile. I'd do it again with those guys. Greatest group of guys in the world, and our first duty is to remember 10/23/83, 241, rest in peace.
And I remember that when we did go over on the ship, that headquarters company, when we got in formations out on the flight deck, was huge. They had the most people on our ship. And when we went back, they barely had a platoon. Maybe if I was going to chow that morning, I would have seen something happening and I could have done something about it. And I doubt it. I doubt it. You know, there's this terrorism thing is a evil in the world, and it is. There's no other way to describe it. It's absolute evil. It is the opposition of everything that's good in life, in the world. Terrorism is the absolute opposite of it. And you know, I'm not all preachy or anything, but you know, blessed are the peacekeepers, for they shall inherit the kingdom of heaven. And you know, I just, one thing I think, it's really amazing, because that's one of those things in the Marine Corps hymn, that the streets of heaven are guarded by United States Marines. And a whole bunch of them went on guard duty on October 23rd, 1983. You know, they went.
The Beirut Memorial, located just outside Camp Johnson, North Carolina, forever stands for those Marines killed in their support for freedom and peace, and shall never be forgotten. Throughout history, Marines have faced fear, looked into the eyes of the enemy, and remain the world's most feared fighting force.
Where do we get such men? Well, you're the answer to that question. Those men he was speaking of came from cities and towns as you have come, from farms and villages, all the product of the freest and the greatest society that man has ever known.
America seeks no new territory, nor do we wish to dominate others. We commit our resources and risk the lives of those in our armed forces to rescue others from bloodshed and turmoil, and to prevent humankind from drowning in a sea of tyranny. Let us close ranks with them in tribute to our fallen heroes, their loved ones, who gave more than can ever be repaid. They're now part of the soul of this great country, and will live as long as our liberty shines as a beacon of hope to all those who long for freedom and a better world.
Fighting battles from the air, land, and sea, from the jungle to the desert and urban cities. The Marines continue to stand for the freedoms of America, the pursuit of democracy, and the restoration of stability and peace. Remember Beirut. Semper Fidelis.